Senior Analyst Varric pressed his three-fingered hand against the console and felt his stomach turn. The footage had been playing for 6 hours now. 6 hours of watching the impossible. 6 hours of questioning everything he thought he knew about biology, warfare, and the universe itself. The Galactic Council had dismissed humans as primitive creatures when they first made contact. Their home world was a death trap. Extreme temperatures, violent weather patterns, predators everywhere, and a star that bombarded them with radiation. No species should have evolved intelligence on such a world. Yet somehow, against all probability, they had. Varric remembered laughing at the human ambassador during the first diplomatic meeting. The soft-skinned creature had no natural armor, no claws, no venom, and no biological weapons of any kind. The Kelrani delegation had wondered openly how such weak beings had even survived long enough to achieve space travel. That question haunted him now as he watched a human soldier take a plasma bolt directly to the chest. The footage came from the border conflict on Nexus 7. A routine patrol of Galactic Defense Forces had encountered a human military unit. Someone had fired first. No one could agree on which side. But the automated recording drones had captured everything that followed. Varric rewound the footage and watched again. The human soldier, identified in the files as Sergeant Marcus Chun, took the plasma bolt at close range. The impact should have killed him instantly. The medical scanners on the recording drone confirmed massive tissue damage. His heart had stopped beating for 11 seconds. Yet Sergeant Chun remained standing. He looked down at the smoking hole in his chest armor. He looked up at the Kelrani soldier who had shot him. Then he raised his weapon and returned fire with perfect accuracy. The Kelrani fell dead. Sergeant Chen then proceeded to engage 2 more enemy combatants before finally collapsing behind cover. The medical data streaming from his suit showed his heart had restarted on its own. Varric felt his scales prickle with fear. He had served in the military for 30 cycles. He had studied combat tactics from 100 different species. Nothing had prepared him for this. He called his assistant into the room. Young Analyst Thresh entered cautiously. She had been screening footage from the same engagement, and her normally blue scales had turned pale gray with shock. Varric gestured toward the screen. He asked her if she had found similar incidents. Thresh nodded slowly and transferred her files to the main display. The screen split into dozens of smaller windows, each showing a different human soldier performing acts that defied all understanding of biology. One soldier continued running on a leg that had been shattered by shrapnel. The bone was clearly broken in multiple places. The medical scanners showed pain levels that would have rendered any other species unconscious. Yet the human kept moving, kept fighting, kept protecting his squad mates until they reached safety. Another soldier took a blade wound that severed a major blood vessel. He should have lost consciousness within seconds from blood loss. Instead, he remained alert for another 4 minutes, during which time he applied a tourniquet to his own arm using his teeth and one hand, eliminated the enemy combatant who had wounded him, and carried an injured comrade to the evacuation point. The footage showed a female soldier who had been hit by a neural disruptor. This weapon was specifically designed to overload the nervous system of any carbon-based life form. It caused instant paralysis in every known species. The human woman experienced what appeared to be a seizure lasting approximately 8 seconds. Then she stood up and continued fighting as if nothing had happened. Thresh pointed to another window. Her voice trembled as she explained what they were seeing. A human soldier had been declared clinically dead by the medical scanners. No heartbeat. No brain activity. Dead by every measurable standard. Yet 43 seconds later, the soldier suddenly gasped, sat up, and asked his squad mates what he had missed. Varric stared at the footage in disbelief. He asked Thresh if the scanners were malfunctioning. She shook her head. She had run diagnostics on every piece of equipment. Everything was functioning within normal parameters. The data was accurate. Humans could die and come back to life. The implications of this discovery sent waves of panic through Varric's mind. How did you fight an enemy that refused to stay dead? How did you plan tactics against soldiers who ignored fatal wounds? How did you win a war against creatures who seemed to operate on pure willpower alone? He started researching human biology with desperate intensity. What he found only deepened his horror. Humans possessed a chemical system in their bodies that could completely suppress pain during crisis situations. They called it adrenaline. This substance flooded their system during combat and allowed them to ignore injuries that would incapacitate any other species. They could fight with broken bones, with massive blood loss, with damage to vital organs. Their bodies also possessed remarkable healing abilities. They could regenerate damaged tissue at rates that seemed almost like magic. A wound that would kill a Calrani in hours could heal on a human in weeks. They regularly survived diseases and injuries that would be 100% fatal to other species. But the most terrifying discovery was their minds. Human consciousness was not centered in their brains the way it was in other species. Their sense of self was distributed throughout their entire nervous system. This meant that even when their brains began shutting down from trauma, some part of them remained aware. Some part of them kept fighting. Varric found records of human soldiers who had continued combat operations with severe head trauma. Their higher brain functions were clearly compromised. They could not speak or recognize their own names, yet their bodies knew how to fight. Their muscles remembered the training. Their instincts took over when their minds could not. He also discovered that humans could consciously override their own survival instincts. Every other species in the galaxy had automatic responses that would force them to stop fighting when injuries became too severe. It was a biological safety mechanism. The body protected itself from further harm. Humans could turn this off. Through sheer force of will, they could push through any injury, ignore any pain, and keep fighting until their bodies physically could not move anymore. Sometimes, not even then. The footage showed humans dragging themselves across battlefields with injuries that should have killed them minutes earlier. Varric compiled his analysis and prepared to present it to the Galactic Council. He knew they would not want to hear what he had to say. He knew it would change everything about their strategic planning. But they needed to understand what they were dealing with. The council chamber fell silent as he presented his findings. The representatives from a dozen different species watched the footage with growing unease. Many of them had dismissed humans as inferior beings. Many of them had supported aggressive actions against human territory. None of them spoke now. Varric explained that humans were not fighting the way other species fought. They were not trying to survive combat. They were trying to win combat. These were two completely different goals. Other species fought until the odds of survival became too low. Then they retreated. Humans fought until they achieved their objective or until their bodies physically stopped working. He showed them the statistics. In the engagement on Nexus 7, human forces had suffered casualty rates that would have caused any other military unit to surrender. Instead, they had continued fighting and achieved complete tactical victory. They had done this not through superior technology or greater numbers. They had done this through sheer biological stubbornness. The Calrani ambassador demanded to know how this was possible. Varric explained that humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They had survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most persistent. They had developed bodies and minds that simply refused to quit. This persistence had become encoded in their very biology. Human soldiers did not choose to keep fighting after fatal injuries. Their bodies did it automatically. Pain made them angry rather than afraid. Injury made them more determined rather than less. Near-death experiences triggered a surge of survival chemicals that made them more dangerous, not less. Varric concluded his presentation with a recommendation that shocked the entire council. He advised immediate diplomatic negotiations with humanity. He advised against any further military action. He advised treating humans as equals rather than primitives. Several council members protested. They pointed out that human technology was inferior. Their ships were slower. Their weapons were less powerful. Surely, the combined might of the Galactic Council could overwhelm them. Varric asked them to consider what would happen in a prolonged conflict. UN soldiers could sustain casualty rates that would destroy any other military. They could keep fighting in conditions that would force any other species to surrender. They could survive wounds that would kill any other combatant. A war against humanity would not end quickly. It would drag on for years, perhaps decades. And every year, humans would adapt. They would improve their technology. They would learn galactic tactics. They would become more dangerous. But worse than this was what the footage revealed about human psychology. These soldiers had continued fighting not for glory or conquest. The audio recordings showed them calling out to each other, encouraging each other, refusing to leave wounded comrades behind. They had fought through fatal injuries because they cared about the people beside them. Varric had studied warfare his entire life. He had never encountered a species whose soldiers would literally die and come back to life for each other. This was not an enemy that could be defeated through force. This was not a species that would surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. The Council voted unanimously to begin peace negotiations. Months later, Varric attended the signing of the Human Galactic Cooperation Treaty. He watched Sergeant Marcus Chun shake hands with the Kelrani ambassador. The sergeant wore his dress uniform proudly. Beneath the medals on his chest, Varric knew there was a scar where a plasma bolt had stopped his heart. Chun caught Varric looking at him and smiled. He walked over and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. Varric had learned about handshakes during his research. He reached out and grasped the sergeant's hand carefully. Chun asked if Varric was the analyst who had recommended peace. Varric confirmed that he was. Chun thanked him sincerely. He said that his people did not want war. They wanted friendship. They wanted to explore the stars alongside the other species of the galaxy. Varric asked him about the footage. He asked how Chun had kept fighting after his heart stopped. Chun shrugged casually. He said he had people depending on him. He said he could not let them down. He said that giving up was never really an option. Varric released the handshake and watched the human walk away. He finally understood what made humans so dangerous. It was not their biology, though that was terrifying enough. It was not their persistence, though that defied all logic. It was their love. Humans would die for each other. They would refuse death for each other. They would bend the very laws of nature for each other. This was a species that could not be conquered because they would never stop fighting for the people they cared about. The galaxy had made first contact with many species over the centuries. Some were stronger, some were smarter, some were more technologically advanced, but none of them were human. And Varric suspected the difference would change the course of galactic history forever. He returned to his analysis work with a new perspective. He was no longer studying an enemy. He was studying a future ally. And he found himself grateful that the first meeting between their species had ended in peace rather than war. Because if it had not, he was quite certain his people would have lost.